And our presenter is Maria Byrne, and she is talking about breaking down barriers to learning. Now, a little bit about um, her topic. She's going to be talking about supporting learners in an inclusive classroom. So, practical teaching ideas, practical teaching principles, and strategies in order to be more inclusive in the classroom. A little bit about Maria. Maria is a NILE associate trainer specializing in learner differences and inclusion. Maria did her master's degree in variables affecting motivation and engagement for learners with dyslexia. So she's very, very well placed to talk to us about learner differences and inclusion. Maria is also a keen contributor to the world of CPD, continuing professional development, and she often talks and writes about multisensory learning, creative teaching, and learner engagement. And today she's here to talk to us about inclusive learning and an inclusive classroom. So perhaps, yes, indeed, we can find some interesting methods she can offer us to use in a practical way in our English classrooms. So, Maria, could I get you to turn your camera and microphone on? We're going to wait for Maria to turn her camera and microphone on. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Maria.
Hi. Hello. Hi, Tia. Thanks for
And
the introduction.
where are you joining us from?
I'm actually at work at Nile.
Right, so you're in the United
Nor-
Kingdom.
I'm in Norwich, yeah, in the UK.
Well, we're really, really happy to have you kick off our day of webinars today with your presentation, Breaking Down Barriers to Learning. I'll let you take it away from here. Thank you.
Okay. Hello. Hello, everyone. I'm already getting some hellos there, so that makes me feel welcome. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you guys from all over the world. Chia's already said a little bit about what I'm talking about. Um, but yeah, the main principles today that I want us to explore is learner differences that we have in our classroom, and we'll also be doing a few experimental activities to try and put ourselves in the shoes of our learners. And we'll also be looking at some practical solutions as well to help our learners learn to break down those barriers that they may have. So first of all, got the slides there. I'd like everyone just to take a minute to think about what inclusion and learning differences mean to you. Okay, so thinking about your actual classrooms, thinking about your students, maybe you can picture them. What does inclusion and learning differences mean to you in terms of your teaching context? Some people have already started typing. Yep, great. Put down some ideas in the chat box. Some people have said different types of intelligences. I like to allow the learners to be themselves because they all have their own different ways of learning and seeing the world and perceiving the world. Equal opportunities. Different backgrounds. Okay, good. Okay, right, thanks. We've got lots and lots of ideas there. So I'd like to ask you a quick question. Is there anyone in the world that has the same brain as you? No, okay. So we all know this. We all have different brains. We all see the world and perceive the world differently. So as some of you were saying in the chat box, learning differences is just that. It's that every single learner in our class is different. Every single teacher is different. We all think differently. We all see the world differently, and therefore we all learn differently. So we can't, necessarily put learners into boxes. For example, we can't say your visual learners, your auditory learners. It's much more complex than that. And actually, we may be different because of so many factors. Our social background, somebody mentioned our educational background, our culture, okay, as well as the learning differences that we often think about, such as dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD, etc. We are in fact all different. I asked this question to some teachers that I was training recently, and this is the response that one of the teachers gave. You see that here there's a mind map, and they were exploring what makes every learner in their class different. And we can see here we've got some of the ideas that you've also said: social background, their interest, maybe sex. If they're male, female, they might, there is some scientific research to say that that does actually affect how we learn. Our L1, so our mother tongue, our mood. So we actually might be different from at different times of the day. On different days, we may just wake up in a bad mood, as I'm sure most of you have experienced. This teacher has put disabilities. That's not a word that I maybe would use. I talk about, maybe learning difficulties or learning differences, such as, dyspraxia, dyslexia, autism, ADHD, and other factors as well. Our educational background may affect how we learn, our cultural background, etc. So it's a very, very complex area, and it's also a very interesting one too. The problem is, I think, for us teachers is that we are encouraged, which is a good thing, to think about how our learners are all different, unique, special, individual. At the same time, we are all having to give them the same standardized tests. In many countries throughout the world, we still test every student in a class in the same way. And I'm just going to show you a picture about this and see what you think about the picture. You may have seen it before. Hopefully you can all see the slides. Yes, okay. Yeah, this picture and this, pictures similar to this have been around for quite a while. And I think they should be up in every staff room, just to remind ourselves that, we put students through this. We have to give them these standardized tests, but actually they've all got different strengths. They've all got different weaknesses. And sometimes the tests are not helping them, realize that and explore those areas. So as teachers, we need to be very creative. We need to think outside of the box. We need to think about the individual learners to try and help them to, achieve the aims of the class, or the end of semester when they have to do these tests. We still need to prepare them for the tests, but maybe in more individualized ways. Okay, so first of all, well, not first of all, but following from that, I'd like to ask you guys a question. Do you have a learning barrier? Is teachers here, we think of the students as having learning barriers or barriers to learning, but do we ourselves have some barriers as well? Do we have maybe some things that make things difficult for us to learn? concentration span. Anxiety. Okay, okay, right. Quite a difficult question, kind of throwing you in there at the deep end. But I'm going to do a little experiment now so we can explore this area more fully. Okay, so I'm going to need the first poll question. Okay, so before you answer, I'd just like you to think about the last 7 days of your life, just 7 days. And have you confused your left with your right in the last 7 days? This sometimes happens to me when I'm driving, especially when I was having driving lessons, and my instructor would say, turn right, and I'd be like, which way is right? So just, think about that. Have any of you confused your left with your right in the last 7 days? And if you could use the poll to answer yes or no, if you could use the poll, please. Okay, hopefully people are able to use the poll. Is that okay? Okay, would it be possible to show the results of the poll? Okay, so in the last 7 days, the percentage of you that have confused your left with your right, about 41%. So almost half, almost half. Okay, just keep that in the back of your mind. 41%. Okay, if we could have the next question. So again, thinking about the last 7 days of your life. Have we got the next poll? So in the last 7 days, have you pretended to get a joke? Someone tells you a joke and you're ha ha ha, and you're actually thinking, don't really understand the joke. Maybe you have to go away and think about it. So in the last 7 days, have you pretended to get a joke? I'll give you a few more seconds to answer using the poll. Okay, so can we check the results of that, please? Okay, so we got 66% of the people attending this webinar have pretended to get a joke. Okay, wow, that's quite high. It's something that I do quite often, and I do have to go away and think about it because it takes me a while sometimes to process. Okay, right. So let's go to the next question, please. Okay, so think about in the last 7 days, have you had difficulties pronouncing a long word? I'll give you a few more seconds to answer in the poll. Okay, right, could we see the results for that one? Okay, so again, quite high. 60% of people have had difficulties pronouncing a long word. And I sometimes get that with certain types of words, like phenomenon, onomatopoeia, those kind of words that sometimes it's just really hard to pronounce them correctly. Okay, next question, please. Can we have the next question up? Have we got the next poll? Still waiting for the next question to come up. No? Okay, right. Well, okay, there it is. Okay, obviously technical hitch there probably. In the last 7 days, have you gone to a room and forgotten what you went there for? So you go to the room, you're like, oh, why am I here? And you can't remember what you actually went to that room for. Again, I'll give you a few more seconds. Hopefully you can see the questions. Okay, so if we could check the results of that. And here, I thought this would be quite high. For those of you who were able to vote or able to answer the question, we've got 80% of people who were able to vote have said yes, that they have gone to a room and forgotten what they went there for. So we've got one more question, our last question, please. Okay, so if we could go to our last question. I'm still waiting for the last question. Okay, here we go. So, last question. In the last 7 days, has your brain stopped working due to stress or having too many things to do? So maybe, you've got a lot of things on your mind, and because you're so worried about that, you're not actually able to do anything. So again, a few seconds to give you an opportunity to vote, say yes or no. Okay, and if we could check the results. Okay, we've got 67% of people who were able to vote or answer the question. 67% said yes, this has happened to them. Okay, all right. So why have I been asking you all these strange questions? Okay, let's have a look at this further. If we could go back to the slides, please. Okay, all right. So we can see from that we all have, I just get rid of these. We all have different things that in a way are barriers to learning. For those people that confused their left with their right, this could be a mix of some weaknesses in a way, but it's very, very normal in the visual and sensory processing modes, as well as memory as well. Okay. For people that pretended to get a joke, this may be a mixture of different things. It's a lot to do with perhaps processing speed. All our brains all have different processing speeds, and sometimes when you're hearing something, phonologically, you're hearing the sounds, and then you have to process meaning on top of that. But the meaning might be slightly, there's kind of a double meaning in there that creates the joke. We're not able to do all of that very, very quickly, which is very, very normal, and most of us have experienced it. A lot of you, 60% who said you'd had difficulties pronouncing long words. This may be, probably is connected to phonological processing, an area that is probably focused on the least in many coursebooks, but an area that more very very high number of people have problems, maybe small problems, um, uh, phonologically processing sounds quick enough and actually being able to sort of break down the sounds, especially on the words, and then being able to produce it. Okay, which is really really difficult for many of us. In terms of going into another room and forgetting what you came there for, memory, short-term memory. And as we saw, I think that was the highest number, 80% of the people that were allowed, that were able to vote, have issues with this. And memory is something that we often, is a very, very useful thing for learning, especially when we have tests. But it's the thing that, gets a lot of us. Many of us have problems with short-term memory. And it's something that can help us understand our learners who also may have the same problems. In terms of our brains stopping not working due to stress or overload, this creates anxiety. And anxiety is something that our learners may also face, a problem that they may also face. And when we are feeling stressed and we are feeling anxious, all those other processing issues, for example, phonological, semantic, problems with memory, will get even bigger and will become even worse, to the point that our brains may stop working. So just to summarize that first half of the webinar so far, we've been exploring ourselves in terms of different barriers that we may have ourselves as teachers to learning. These may include phonological barriers, semantic, syntactic, memory, emotions, and senses, and as well as many other things. And by understanding this, by thinking about our own issues and how we deal with them, it can help us understand our learners. Okay, so instead of just thinking, giving them more time to read or more time to do tests, what actually do they need help with? Is it that they're having phonological issues, or that they have issues with their memory, and how can we help them with that? Okay, so we're going to look at some teaching implications to all of this. First of all, I'm going to be speaking, and then I'm going to, for a little bit longer, and then I'm going to show you some activities, some more practical activities. First of all, teaching implications. We really need to think about the quality of our instructions when we're teaching learners that all think and learn differently. We need to break them down. We need to check our instructions. We may sometimes give visual aids, which might be gestures, open your book, for example. And from observing teachers, this is often an area that I find that is often an area that instructions is an area we need to work on as teachers, because if the students don't understand the instructions, maybe because of phonological processing or processing speed, then they can't actually do the task, obviously. Another area is sound-letter relationships. So a lot of students have problems with sound-letter relationships, especially when learning English, because it often doesn't, our spelling system doesn't make any sense quite a lot of the time. Okay, so if you have issues phonologically processing things, and then you have to kind of connect that sound with letters or groups of letters that correspond to that sound, and the sound letter relationships in that language are not very clear, not very transparent, this really may cause a lot of difficulties for learners, not just with dyslexia, but with many other learners as well. Challenge, just to make sure, of course, that the challenge is appropriate, because if anything is too difficult, and this might be because they just don't understand what they have to do, or they're having problems writing because of their motor skills or something like that, the easiest strategy is for a learner to just not do it. Okay, so when we see, we've got to make sure that the challenge is appropriate to the learner. Another thing for us teachers to think about is multitasking. So often we ask our students to multitask, and we've already seen from ourselves that when our brains are overloaded, we have a lot to do. Sometimes our brains just stop working. We may just be asking a student to copy something from the board, but what are they actually doing there? They might be having to read, they're having to write, they may have issues writing because of maybe motor skills, or because they have problems with phonological processing. So mapping sound letter relationships is going to be difficult, and that's going to make it a lot of more of a slower process copying something down. Purpose, interest, value. Is it interesting to the learner? Is it meaningful? Do they actually want to learn about this thing? And teacher persona. Teacher persona is actually one of the has the biggest impact on student motivation. So, how do the learners feel? Do they feel supported? Do they feel that they can ask questions? Do they feel that they're able to be open about maybe learning issues or things that they are finding difficult in class? Is the teacher interested in the actual student as an individual, not just in terms of what they have to teach, but actually in the individual as a whole person? Okay, so we're going to look at some practical activities now that may give us some ideas of different things that we can do in the classroom. Sorry, somebody asked me persona. Yeah, personality. Yeah, when I say teacher persona, I'll go back to the last slide. Didn't maybe make that clear. Teacher persona, it's the personality perhaps that you choose to show the students in the classroom. We may actually change our personality a little bit depending on the situation that we're in. So yeah, our teacher persona, the side of us that we choose to show our learners. Some people may have quite a strict persona, and others may be more open or friendly or using humour in the class, etc. So we all have different personas in different situations. Okay, so the topic, I'm going to do a few activities here, but they're all based on food. So I hope you're not feeling too hungry, because otherwise you're going to be thinking about eating instead of my activities. But food, and I've brought some food along with me. I don't know if you can see this. Can you see my tray here of food? Yeah. Okay, what have I got on that? Can anyone see what's on there? I hold it like this a little bit. Yummy. I've got a carrot, which looking a little bit of a sad carrot. A tomato. Got to think about which way to hold this. Tomato. Apple. A potato. Doesn't look very nice, actually. Get an old potato. Banana. And an avocado. Yeah, thank you. That's right. Banana, avocado, carrot. Okay, great. Okay, so first of all, just thinking about the senses. I've got using the senses. So if sometimes you might see in course books, you might be teaching fruits and vegetables. Can we actually bring in the food items? Or we might be teaching clothes. Can we bring in the clothes? Maybe get the kids to hang the, clothes on a washing line or something like that. So kind of, thinking outside the box, especially with food. It's great if they get to actually touch some food, and it will help them with their memories as well, or with any memory issues. Using the senses, you might get your students to close their eyes. Okay, so I might do it now. I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to feel one of these things, and I think it's a carrot. Pretty sure it's a carrot. Yeah. Okay, but the students can do that themselves. You can put them in their students' hands and they feel with their eyes closed, and they have to tell you what the fruit or the vegetable is. They could also do this in groups. We're going to do a little experiment here. So I'm actually going to do an experiment with sound. Okay, so we could obviously do this with taste. We could get them to taste the food. We could get them to do this with smell. Okay, but sound, how could we mix this lesson up with sound? So I'm just going to move away from the screen for about 3 seconds, and I would like you to guess from listening what I'm doing. Okay, are you ready? Hmm. Okay, eat an apple. Yay! Exactly. So you might be teaching them present continuous, and you get the students to close their eyes, and you do something like that, and they have to tell you, oh, you're eating an apple, for example. Okay, so just kind of some novel ways that we can sort of play with food, play with the vocabulary that we're doing in a lesson. Okay, the next thing that I want to look at, we're still looking at using the food, is phonological processing. And this is something, I'm still an apple. This is something that I think about quite a lot, and I focus on in class a lot, because I have taught students who all have dyslexia, and one of the roots of dyslexia, one of the causes, is phonological processing issues. But actually, if you think about learning a language, to learn a language, you need to phonologically process sounds, obviously. You need to understand meaning, and you need to, it helps to have an understanding of syntax, so word order, etc. But so to be a really good language learner, there's kind of language learners that just pick up language without even trying. It's quite annoying, actually, because I'm not one of those learners. They may be strong in phonological, in semantic and syntactic processing areas, but if we're weak at learning languages, or we find it a little bit more difficult, we may be weak in one of those areas, or 2 or 3 of those areas. And actually, more people are weaker in the area of phonological processing. So we really need to do a lot with this, and it's something that it may not be focused on in course books, so we need to focus on it and need to bring those kind of activities to class to help our learners. Okay, so we're going to do a few activities with our fruits and vegetables here, okay, with sound. So I'm going to bring this screen down a little bit again, okay. All right. So the first activity I'm going to do is to ask you how many, oh, I've got the survey up again, we don't want that survey, is I'm going to say a word connected to these food items, and I want you to tell me how many syllables are in that word. So I need the next poll question, if that's okay. So the next poll question. Okay, no, not that one. Okay, while we're waiting for that slide, I could actually just ask you the question so you could think about it. So I'm going to say a word related to my vocabulary here, okay? And I want you to think how many syllables are in this word, okay? Vegetable. I'll say the word again. Think how many, oh, lots of you are answering here in the chat instead, okay? I think we'll just cancel the poll. We'll just cancel the poll, don't worry, keep it on the slide. Okay, vegetable. Okay, right, interesting. So syllables. So if you think like my name is Maria, 3 syllables, right? So I'll say it again, vegetable. How many syllables can you hear? Yeah, so a lot of you have said 4, and a lot of you have said 3. And I'll say it slower and see what you think. Vegetable, 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 vegetable. 3. So give yourselves a clap if you got 3. And often our brains, we find it hard to actually listen to sounds because our brains are giving us other information. We might be thinking, oh, well, it's spelt vegetable, so 4 syllables. But we need to train our learners not to kind of cut off that sort of voice in the brain, okay, that may be connected to their own language and their own sound systems, but actually train them to listen, okay, so that they simple words like computer, vegetable, whiteboard, how many syllables are they actually hearing? Another thing we can do with this is like these sound cards, okay? So I don't know if you can remember the food that I showed you earlier, but this matches the stress pattern, so got da 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 da, to one of those food items on the tray. Excellent, someone's got it, yep, good. So it was avocado, good. And then we could like match the sound to the item here. And this is a very nice visual representation. So we're working on, sounds, we're working on phonology, but they also have something visual that may help them remember, okay, help them with memory as well, to be able to say this word correctly in the future. So avocado, avocado. Another activity which you can do with really large classes. You can do it with small classes or large classes, but that really focuses on phonological processing. Okay, if we work with this word, okay, potato, potato. Okay, how many syllables? Okay, 3. Yeah, potato. Okay, right. So if I say I'm the teacher and I say the word potato, my students have these little rods. Now you could use Lego or any kind of blocks would work. And they just have to first say how many syllables they hear. So I've got p, te, to. Okay, you don't need to use this. They could just put the rods or blocks straight on their desk. And it's a really nice quick way to check that everyone in the class is hearing, phonologically processing the same thing. Now let's make that a little bit more interesting. So now I've got this orange one here, and this is the stress. Okay, so I've got my word again: potato, potato, potato. And I also like moving with the stress, and they've noticed potato. And then I have here to do this again, but this time, whoops, to put, it's going to be hard to keep this one standing up, to put it in the correct place. So here I have a quick look around the classroom. Good. Potato, potato. Okay, so another visual way, also kinesthetic way, to help the students phonologically processing sounds. This could also work for grammar, sentence stress, etc. Another one of my favourites is back chain drilling. Okay, so for example, if I say, oh, potato, potato, and then the students have to repeat the word. Now I'd better go on a bit quicker because we're running out of time. So here I've got, just summarise there, focus on phonological processing. Ask students how many syllables they hear, where's the stress, and also back chain drilling. Okay, can you help me? This is a way of personalising food. So I tell the students, I'm very, very poor, as most teachers are. I want to buy a house, so I need to save up all my pennies. I have some eggs and I have some spinach, but it could be any food, and €5. In groups, they design a recipe for me. I go home at some point that week and I actually cook it. And this is one that this is a picture of my son eating the food that one of the groups had advised me to make. So kind of making those personal connections with students also can really help us with the learning differences. Okay, I'm having to go quite quickly now, I'm sorry. Okay, the other idea is to be creative, and we have to be creative to be teachers, thinking outside the box. So we might be looking at food, but we might be doing verbs, for example, for cooking. And often in the course book, you have match the picture to the verb, and you've got bake and mix and all these kind of things. But can they kind of use these words or use these verbs in a creative way? So here's a little poem that I actually created for this webinar, but something that maybe you could do in your class, like an inclusion cake. Okay, so here's the inclusion cake poem, recipe. Mix some super cool thinkers with some great ideas. Add imaginative and curious minds. Splash in some logic, attention to detail, and don't forget the big picture. Add some generous spoons of humour, musical ears, dancers, jokers, and mix all the different personalities together and let them cool. Now cover with an equal amount of respect, empathy, and kindness, and your cake is ready. Note, all the ingredients are equally important. Treating one ingredient better than the other will leave an unpleasant taste. Okay, I hope you like that poem. Maybe something you could get your students to do, thinking about what they bring to class or about themselves as, you know, as a whole person. Okay, not just as an English learner. Okay, so just to summarise some of the classroom ideas that we looked at for the inclusive classroom today. Thinking outside the box, using the senses whenever we can to engage our learners. Work on phonological processing. Be creative and allow the students to be creative as well, even if they are learning for a test. Being creative might be the thing that helps them remember the language. Personalise, even if it's sharing things about yourself or allowing them, giving them opportunities to share things with each other or about each other. Recycle, reuse. So we've talked about food, but we've done it in many different ways. You know, so keeping a variety of activities going, maybe around the same topic, but just to help it actually go into their brains in a much more concrete way and help it the learning be memorable. Metacognitive reflection, something I haven't really mentioned in this session, but an example of metacognitive reflection, which is just thinking about learning, how we learn, what we learn. If I do a metacognitive reflection activity with you now, I might ask you to think of one thing that you can take away from this session that we've just had. Okay, so I will ask you, is there one thing that you think, oh, that's given me some ideas or some food for thought, or maybe when I go back to my class, I'm going to do some activities on this. If there's just one thing that you could take away from this session, what would it be? A recipe for this. Yeah, the recipe plan. Great. Okay, so thank you guys for attending the session.